page.
I hereby call this special board budget meeting to order. First agenda item will be 1.2, Lafayette Parish School Board certification pursuant to Gubernatorial Proclamation G 120-30. And if you give me a second, I'll go ahead and read this notice. Please be advised that due to the public health emergency caused by the coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, and the stay-at-home orders issued by President Trump and Governor Edwards, the Lafayette Parish School Board will, for the duration of this emergency, conduct board meetings and committee meetings electronically via telephone and/or video conference. Accordingly, the special school board meeting scheduled for today, March 31st, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. will be streamed live via our YouTube channel. A link to watch the meeting can be found on the school board's website, www.lpssonline.com, at the bottom of the home page, so that members of the public may view the meeting. Simply click on the YouTube icon and you will be directed to our page. A period for public comment will be provided before action is taken by the board on an agenda item. Individuals wishing to make a public comment about any of the posted agenda items will need to call 337-521-7018 at the designated time for each agenda item. The board president will announce when it is time for public comment on agenda items, and individuals with comments regarding that item should call in at that time. The comment period will remain open until all calls are taken, and then the comment period for that agenda item will be closed. With that being said, we'll move on to our agenda. We'll start with 2.1, Finance Review of 2020-2021 Budget Recap and Timeline. Mr. Guidry?
Yes, thank you. With regards to our timeline, there's been two changes. The meetings that were previously scheduled for April 8th and 16th have been pushed back to April 15th and April 23rd as a result of what we've been experiencing, the impact of the coronavirus. Those are the only two date changes on the calendar. Well, I apologize. Actually, those two meetings get pushed back a week, which in essence pushes back the public inspection and the actual adoption by a week. So everything's basically been pushed back by a week so that public inspection begins April 30th through May 13th, and we would be have a public hearing on the 13th of May, followed by a special board meeting at 4 p.m., at which time we're planning on having the budget adopted. That represents total changes made to the calendar at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Guidry. Do we have any questions from any of our board members? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to 2.2, Finance Preliminary Report 2020-2021 General Fund Budget Summary, Projected Revenues and Expenditures. Mr. Guidry?
Yes, with regards to the I need to do the video as well. Okay. With regard to the general fund budget summary, I thought I would begin with a quick overview of the layout of the report. Won't spend a lot of time on it, but for our new board members, it might be of assistance. With regards to the first column, row reference, that's basically, Ms. Richard, if you could point to the columns, we'll go through them pretty quickly. That's basically just to provide our board members and the general public with a reference to any line item that may have a question. The next column, heading cost center. When we get to the expenses, we'll have the cost center numbers, followed by the supervisors who are responsible for those cost centers. The following column is the title, which is the budget line item or description of the cost center title. The next column is the 2021 baseline budget roll forward. So what this represents is the budget. At that time, we took a snapshot of the fiscal year 20 budget, the current year budget. This was the budget that was in place. That's our starting point. And to that baseline budget, we have a column in which we put all of our baseline budget adjustments. Those baseline budget adjustments basically include step increase. In this case, we've included the step increase of about $2 million. It also reflects current staffing, meaning the roll forward budget had the staffing when we prepared the 20 budget last year. So we have to adjust staffing to reflect the staffing that's in place this year, as we've had people exit the system for various reasons, retirement or exiting the system for other reasons. We also have benefit changes. For example, the teachers' retirement system rate went from 26% in the current year to 25.87%, a slight reduction. So same thing for the Louisiana school employees retirement system rate. It went from 29.4% to 28.7%. The total savings for just those two changes was right at about $680,000. One other item in that adjustment column would be if there are any adjustments to stipends. Ms. Richard, would those be coaching stipends, basically, for the changes in the coaches? Okay. So that represents the baseline budget adjustments. So if you add the roll forward baseline to the adjustments, you arrive at our starting point, our adjusted baseline. And to that column, we add our proposed, the transfer column is what we use internally. Our cost center supervisors can go in and transfer budgets, line items. It might from one line item to another, a dollar amount from one line item to another, depending on what their needs are. That relates to the expenditure section. And when we look at the cost center detail in agenda items 2.3 to 2.7, you can see the detail of all the transfers. There aren't very many. The next column, proposed increases, or in the revenue section, it represents the increases that I'm going to review shortly, and the budget assumptions that we use in arriving or calculating those increases. Proposed decreases, the same, and arriving at the proposed budget that we're presenting to the board. This is the budget that we're proposing move forward in the process. Of course, as we proceed through this process, anything that a board member may wish to add, the board takes action on doing so, we'll include that as well for our next meeting. So the proposed increases and decreases as described relate to revenues. When we get to the expenditure section, those represent the increases and decreases that have been requested by the respective cost center supervisors. The cost center detail that has been provided in agenda items 2.3 to 2.7 detail those out as well by cost center, and also provides an explanation / justification for those requests. And the administrative adjustments column, if we noted any changes, if there were any adjustments after all the reports that had been generated, we post them here, and we go back later and put them into Alio, our financial system. There's only, I think, two of those. And then we arrive at the proposed budget for this meeting. Last column is footnotes. The footnotes are meant to explain any material increases, decreases, or that if there are any questions after those footnotes are reviewed, we can go ahead and review them at that point in time. So with that said, I'm going to get started reviewing the general fund budget unless there's any questions concerning the layout of the report.
Do we have any board member questions? All right, Mr. Guidry, proceed, sir.
Okay, we'll start with fund balance. With regards to fund balance, this is our beginning fund balance that's taken from the audited financials dated June 30 of 19. You'll notice the breakdown are different classifications of fund balance. They haven't changed. They're the same as in the audit report. Non-spendable, restricted, committed. That's the 2.5 months of expenses that we basically set aside or commit to basically offset any economic downturn. This would give us time to react to those downturns. And then assigned and unassigned as well, which brings us to our starting fund balance of $64,441,288. The next section is revenues. So revenues are broken down between local, state, and federal. With regards to our local revenues, sales taxes and property taxes make up a significant portion of our local revenues. Both of them represent about 25% of our total revenues in our general fund. So if the two together represent about half of our revenues for our general fund. In the state section, the minimum foundation program funding, MFP, as a lot of us are know it by or reference it by, is about 46%. So between those three funding sources, that's 96% of our revenue base. So that's where we'll spend most of our time discussing budget assumptions. And if there are any questions beyond that, of course, we'll be happy to entertain those and respond to those as well. So beginning with the local revenue section, sales taxes, the proposed increases between the 65 tax and the 88 tax total $1.5 million. And that increase reflects a 1.5% increase what we have projected for fiscal year 20. 1.5% increase, which represents about $660,000. The other $856,000 is a true up of the fiscal year 20 revenues to what we're actually experiencing. So the budget is we've actually exceeded budget in 20. So we recognize that or true that up. That's $856,000. And then in addition to that, we increase the projected revenues for next year by 1.5%. The total of those two is about $1.1 million. Any questions with regards to sales tax budget?
Any board member questions? We have none. Mr. Guidry, proceed.
Okay, the next line item in the revenue section is that of property taxes. There, we're proposing an increase of about $3.3 million. That $3.3 million represents or includes a 2% increase over the projected revenues for fiscal year 20, our current year. So the 3.35 million includes $1.5 million to reflect that 2% increase, and it also reflects 1.9 million because our budget for year 20 is less than our projected revenues. So we actually true those up first, and then we add the 2% over and above that, arriving at the $3.3 million increase. In the local revenue section, the only other line item I'm going to discuss is that of interest income. We are projecting or have included a $8,000 decrease. That's reflecting the interest rates that we've experienced and seen over the past month and a half. And so we've rolled it forward a bit, going forward several months, anticipating that these interest rates would continue on for some time to come. So that's what the $800,000 decrease represents. I'll move on to state revenues. The most significant line item there is MFP revenues. Our baseline budget is $136.8 million. That's the amount that rolled forward and is our starting point for the fiscal year 21 budget. We've increased that by $3.6 million to arrive at our proposed budget of $140.4 million. A couple of things I'd like to note here is that the MFP simulation that was sent to Bessie included a 2.75% increase in the per pupil amount. Basically, it would go from, I think it's $1,004 to $1,025. That 2.75% increase that Bessie's recommending to the legislature includes or indicates or requires that half of that increase go towards a certificated personnel pay increase. That equates to about $481 per year per certificated personnel. So of that 2.75, it would be required to use half that increase for certificated personnel, and of course the other half we would be able to use as the board would so desire. So the increase, the $3.6 million increase, for the most part, does not reflect the 2.75. And if the legislature were to approve it, we'll be more than happy to come back and do a budget revision. We took a conservative route. We didn't want to rely on those additional revenues to balance our budget until they were actually been approved, until we see whether or not the legislature will actually approve it. So for the time being, the increase that you're seeing there, for the most part, is to do our increase in our weighted average number of students. And that and the interaction of our sales tax and property tax revenues, the local revenues, as a percentage of the total revenues for levels 1 and levels 2. Any questions with regards to MFP before I move forward?
Any board member questions? Dr. Aguilar?
Mr. Guidry, in your footnotes, you're showing that the MFP increase is a result of an increase in the weighted average calculation for students. And what I just heard you say, that that $3.6 million is based on maybe an anticipated increase in the number of students. Those are two completely different calculations. So which is it? Is it because you expect a larger number of units based on weighted average, special ed students, career and technical units, or is it based on increase in population?
It's a combination of both. An increase in the MFP count, as well as an increase in the or the additional weighting that we've received for the various categories. So the combination of both.
So I'd be interested in receiving or hearing about your actual calculations to arrive at the $3.6 million increase. So if you could maybe put that together and submit that maybe at the next budget workshop, I'd appreciate that.
Certainly.
Any more questions, Dr. Aguilar? Any other board member questions or comments?
Me, of course. Britt?
Kate.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Kate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Real quick, if you could also put together, Billy, a breakdown of the rents, leases, and royalties revenue, like where those revenues are attributable to, that would be great too as well. Thank you.
Ms. LaBoo, could you repeat that, please?
I would ask Mr. Guidry, if possible, for the next budget meeting, if he could have a breakdown of all of the revenue sources, the rents, leases, and royalties that are listed, if we could just have a list of those sources.
Yes.
Thank you.
We can do that.
Thank you, Ms. LeBeau. Any more questions? All right, Mr. Guidry, proceed.
Okay, under federal revenue, no significant changes there. And the final revenue caption is other revenue. Largest increase is transfer from other funds there. And if you remember, when we reviewed the capital funds on February 18th, earlier this year, we had a transfer included there to the general fund to cover projects that don't quite meet the dollar threshold for a capital project, yet we feel they were important enough to go ahead and complete, and we didn't want to deplete our building maintenance budget in taking care of those projects. And that represents about $1.5 million. The other increase on the revenue is our indirect cost rate. These are basically funding or revenues that we receive from our federal grants to help offset our administrative costs in administering our federal grants. And that basically concludes the revenue section. So the adjusted baseline is $296.1 million. And after adjustments that I've just reviewed, the proposed budget is $305.8 million for fiscal year 21.
Thank you, Mr. Guidry. Our recommended action on this, that the board provides any recommendations to administration with regards to adjustments to be considered during the 2020-2021 budget process. Any board member have anything to add? All right. Next up will be agenda item 2.3, Finance General Fund Cost Centers Proposed Budget for the 1100 series. Mr. Guidry? Yes, Mrs. Zantani?
Mr. Guidry did not get an opportunity to go through the list of increases. Are we going to cover that? The list of increased expenditures. He covered the increased revenues.
Okay. Mrs. Zantani would like to know if you could discuss the increased expenditures.
Yes, that's the next section that we'll be heading into once we get past revenues. That's what we'll be doing at this point.
No, I didn't want. It sounded like we were going to move on to the next agenda item, which would have precluded us from doing that. That was all I wanted to make sure of.
Oh, it's actually the next section of the general fund budget summary that we'll be moving on to. More specifically, row 41.
Okay, so we're not moving to 2.3, correct? We're
Correct.
still on 2.2?
We're still on the general fund budget summary.
Okay, my mistake. Sorry, Mrs. Zantani. Continue, Mr. Guidry.
Okay, with regards to the next section, it's the amounts to be allocated to the cost centers. So there are line items outside of the requests that's did by our cost center supervisors that affect the school district across the entire school district. And this is where we list those. Most of these relate to staffing adjustments. For example, row 43 relates to that particular one is the step increase in pay for performance full-time employees. Row 44 is staffing, adjust to board-approved student-teacher ratios for regular education. The adjustment is a reduction of 4 teachers. And basically what that reflects is we compare our actual teacher count, current teacher count, to the teacher count or teacher slots that are calculated based on rolling forward of our student population, 1 grade level. And we compare the two and determine which schools are entitled to additional teacher slots and which schools will have a decrease in teacher slots based on their projected student enrollment. The net is a decrease of 4 teaching slots, or a savings of $264,000. Row 45, staffing increase intensive algebra teaching slots. That's adding 6 teaching slots that do not or not considered in the staffing on row 44. They are intensive algebra teaching slots at Karen Crow High, Obey Como, Acadian High School, Northside High School, Lafayette High School, and basically it's the 9T students that are being addressed here. Estimated cost of $396,000. Row 45 is what we refer to as regular ed.
Mr. Guidry, yes, sir. I think Dr. Aguilar has a question.
So, board members, the row 45, the 6 intensive algebra teaching slots that are being proposed to be added to the general fund, those positions are absolutely, I believe, needed by the high schools to make sure these kids get the necessary math skills to be successful. The nature of those positions clearly aligns with the 2002 tax that was approved by the voters in Lafayette. The administrative plan allows the 2002 tax to be used for salaries of classroom teachers involved in providing lower class size instruction, as well as salaries of classroom teachers involved in providing extra instruction where needed. I would ask the board to consider moving all or a portion of those 6 teaching positions from the general fund to the 2002 tax, if possible.
Do we need a motion? Is that a motion on this? You need a second and we go to a vote?
I'll make that in the form of a motion.
I would think that's what we need here. I think we need a correct, Mr. Guidry?
It's one of the reasons we have these budget meetings now as a special board meeting, is to allow that sort of thing, so that when we come back for the next meeting, we'll know which adjustments we need to reflect to what's being presented tonight.
Thank you. If you make your motion, Dr. Aguilar.
I move that we allocate the 6 intensive algebra teaching slots to the 2002 tax.
Okay. We have a motion, but we have a motion by Dr. Aguilar, presented by Mr. Broussard. Do we have any public comment?
At this time, we will take public comments. The way public comments will work will be, I will hold up the number and you can call in. There is no, if you get a busy signal, we will continue to, we will give 45 seconds in between phone calls to take the next public comment. I'll hold up the number. The phone is already ringing, but I will hold up the number for viewers.
That number is 337-521-7018. the motion on the floor is that Dr. Aguilar's motion is that we move staffing for the intensive algebra teaching slots to the 2002 tax.
Getting Lafayette Parish teachers to #1 in the state. We have worked for a long time, over the past 20 years, to lower those numbers of teachers that were included, their full salaries into the tax, for the very reason that we wanted more to go to salaries. And this proposal would reverse that and would walk backwards instead of forwards to the ultimate goal of bringing the best teachers we can to this parish by affording them the highest salaries possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Do we have any more public comment?
We'll take 45 seconds for that.
All right. Board members in public, we'll pause for 45 minutes to see if a call comes in.
45 seconds.
45 seconds, I'm sorry.
I got it. Oh, there we go. Hi, this is the public comment line.
Hi, yes, ma'am. Oh, it's kind of going, this is for your home with detail. The person of detail, I'm Dr. Aguilar is trying to move that the 6,000 for teaching slides to the 2002 tax. Is that correct? Because it's kind of going in and out.
Yes, ma'am. It is the 6 algebra intensive slots to be moved to the 2002 sales tax.
Okay, all right then. Did he also address, my question is, the money in the treasury, did he address where the salary has been increased, he addressed where there's going to is that also coming from the state?
Could you turn your volume down maybe on your computer at home? We're having a little trouble hearing you. Could you restate the question?
Okay, let me ask, okay, that's first again. Oh, my first question is when you know, President of Apple, the proposed increase for the salary step increase for the pay performance for full-time employees, is that coming from the 2002 tax? And Dr. Aguilar was kind of going in and out, and you did clarify that the 6 needed positions for algebra teachers, that's coming from the 2002 tax, correct?
Yes, ma'am. But the step increase comes from the general fund budget, correct, Mr. Guidry? So the step increase will come from the general fund budget, and the motion on the floor is the 6 algebra intensive to come from the 2002 sales tax.
All right, that's what I wanted to make sure I heard correctly. 2000, that's coming from the general fund, the other one is coming from, okay, because Dr. Aguilar kept going in and out. So I wanted to make sure I was clear that he was trying to come from the 2002 tax with those positions.
Yes, ma'am. I'm glad we could clear that up. Thank you.
You're welcome, beautiful.
45 seconds. Can you go ahead and put the camera on the public number just in case?
I'll read it again. 337 521 7018. If you have any public comments, we've got about 20 seconds left before we go to board member comment.
Who was the first speaker?
Who was the first speaker?
Right.
Spinoza.
Okay.
Lafayette used to be PA president. We have a call coming in.
Come fix it. Hi, this is the public comment hotline.
Yeah, I was just calling trying to now. So how are we supposed to really follow what's going along?
Channel?
I'm on the YouTube channel, and every board member that's spoken so far are cutting in and out. The callers are cutting in and out. So I don't really know what's going on. I know you're talking about the 2002 tax and adding 6 teachers to that. So does that mean that we're going to, like, their whole salary is going to come out of that?
So I can clarify that for you. There's a motion on the board to move 6 algebra intensive teachers to the 2002 sales tax, which their salary would come out of that 100%.
So that would effectively lower the amount that the rest of the teachers are already getting, right?
In the 13th check, it would lower it to some degree. Mathematically, that would be determined based on the sales tax for revenue for that year.
So then why would we do that? That money is there for the teachers that we have. If we need these teachers, if we need these 6 teachers so badly, why is the board cutting from their end to make it work so that we can have these 6 teachers instead of putting the burden on teachers and taking money out of teachers' pockets?
I'm gonna see who's gonna answer that question.
Hey guys, it's
really a comment. It's not a. Is it?
Yeah,
Comments or questions?
let me remind everybody that
Or
it's
explanation.
comment. It's a comment section. So if a person has comments, they can make comments about it, but there isn't questions to
I
be
believe
asked.
Dr. Aguilar read with the 2002 sales tax all the options possible of what the 2002 sales tax could be used for. So that's why he made the motion based on the different options that you can use the 2002 sales tax for, the Fund 15.
does or should. Are you telling us?
We can, sir, we can read you, read again with or Ms. Barnes can read it. She's going to read exactly Dr. Aguilar's direction from on this. The statements that's in the administrative plan. This is just for comments, sir. We can't answer questions. We've heard your point that you prefer it not be used. Do you have any other comments? We're getting close to your 3-minute time limit.
I can only comment so much about asking a question, right? Which you made. But this tax was originally sold to the public as an increase for teachers, and if you're going to take that increase for teachers and lower it, it's just crushing around to help you out.
We'll go ahead and wait the customary 45 seconds. Oh, we have another call coming in.
Hey, his audio was a little far off in the distance. Is there any way we can raise it up a little or bring the listening device closer?
Okay. We had a call come in accidentally. We're going to go ahead and wait to see if the caller calls back. 337-521-7018. Forty-five seconds. 337-521-7018. You have any comments regarding the motion that the board takes into account for teaching slots 2002 sales tax? When you call in.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. It's Kate. When Jennifer was reading the provisions of the 2002 sales tax, nobody could hear that. Is there any way y'all could repeat that for everyone to hear?
Sure can. Can you move? Can you give me the copy I read from Mr. Blue and the rest of the board members? Give me 1 second. Asking the please hold. Classroom teacher salary and related benefits. Salaries of classroom teacher involved in providing lower class size instruction. Salaries of classroom teachers involved in providing instruction where incentive compensation for classroom teachers, salaries for teaching students in public schools, provide additional professional development for all classroom teachers, and classroom salaries for targeted comprehensive instructional and this is part of the 2001 sales tax proposition. It's the administrative plan that was formed after the tax was passed. Decreased the amount of teaching slots that were taken out of this tax. That has happened. We had a call coming in, Ms. Gardner. Is the caller on the line? It seems to be Mr. Guidry.
When you do look at the administrative plan for that tax, it lists those dedications that Dr. Aguilar read, and then it goes on to say that, or if there's any funds available from time to time, that an additional check, an excess distribution can be declared by the board. I think over the years that excess distribution has been declared every year instead of from time to time, and it's become an expectation. But if you look at the administrative plan, those dedications should be funded first, and then the additional check considered.
Thank you, Mr. Guidry. Public comment is now closed. I'll now open the floor for any board member comments. Okay, hang on one second. And my screen is not allowing me to see you, board members, so please chime in if you have a question. We'll kind of do this in that manner.
Mr. President, it's Mr. Centani.
Go ahead, Mr. Centani.
I won't belabor the point. I think most of the veteran board members know where I stand on this tax. For the benefit of the public and our new colleagues, I'll say that I firmly believe that the voters approved this for salary increases on the whole, to get our teacher salaries up to be competitive across the state. As the first caller mentioned, be competitive with other parishes and making sure we hire the best teachers possible, put them in the classroom. So, as I've often done with motions on this tax, I'll be voting no on this. Though I do agree it's a laudable goal.
Thank you, Mr. Centani. Do we have any other board members with comments?
Kate LeBou, I have a question. Do we have room in the general budget to support any of these positions? Or is there a plan to, right now these are in the general budget, I understand that, but is there a reason why it can't stay in the general budget?
It is in the general budget, and the budget is balanced with it in there. Dr. Aguilar's motion is to just move to the 2002 sales tax. Dr. Aguilar, if you have a comment on that, or what would be the reasoning of taking it from the general fund to the 2002 tax? I'd appreciate it. If not, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Members of the board, the general fund budget currently has additional teachers earmarked for class size reduction in our transformation zone. 0.5 teaching positions this board has at a cost of about $1.35 million to the general fund. And I was supported about adding additional teachers to the transformation zone schools, knowing how important it is to get those kids on track to be successful. These 6 positions that are being proposed are in addition to what the board has already providing by way of reducing class size in our transformation zone schools. It's a permissible use of the 2002 tax, and it's worthy of consideration by the board to value these positions, but to also acknowledge that the 2002 tax is an appropriate location to find the funds for these teachers.
Thank you for the explanation, Dr. Aguilar.
I have a follow-up. I have a follow-up question. I know that there's been a reduction from the original number that we had included within the 2002 sales tax. Can you give me an idea of what the original number, or what that decrease looks like, and how many teachers are actually funded by the 2002 sales tax now?
I would like you to please repeat the question. It's breaking up.
I know originally we had more teachers included in the 2002 sales tax. That number's been reduced, I think y'all said significantly. So can you give us an idea of what the number originally was and what number we currently have funded by the 2002 sales tax?
Originally, there was 120 being charged, and now we're down to 58.
How many? Did you say 8?
58. 58.
58. 58.
58. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. LeBeau. Do we have any other board member comment before we go to the vote? Madam Secretary, I'll call the vote. We'll try to do it electronically and see what happens. Is that the one thing to vote? Dr. Chasson, Ms. Morrison.
I didn't see it. I didn't see it. Oh. Oh. Uh-oh. Like that. Still don't see it. Do I need to go click it down here, maybe? Okay. Yeah, that up here. Wait.
Dr. Chasson, you're the last one we're waiting on, sir. The motion fails. Mr. Guidry, if you want to continue.
Yes, the next line item, row 45, staffing regular ed appeals, equivalent of 17.5 teacher slots. If you were to review footnote 7, which is associated with this particular line item, these appeals basically are for those schools that at certain grade levels, certain sections, they're very, very close to the board-approved student-teacher ratios. And given historical performance in the past with regard to student counts, we anticipate that they would in fact, or will in fact, meet those student-teacher ratios. So that's what the 17.5 teacher slots. The idea is if we were to wait until that actually occurred, then we would be taking a look at having to try to fill these 17.5 slots or in August when school is already started. So the idea is to sort of get a jump on it so that we can start hiring these individuals much earlier.
And if I may, Mr. Latchley, say that line 45, those 17 and a half, those are not only for transformation zone schools. Those are spread across the district where, like Mr. Guidry just explained, there's a grade level where maybe we're one away from allocating another teacher there anyway, and rather than really crowding classes, we're just granting here. But those are not solely in transformation zone schools. Those are schools across the district.
Thank you, Mr. Trosclair.
The next item number 46 is staffing regular education appeals, 5 teacher slots, 330,000. These are truly appeals from the standpoint that when a school administrator comes in, their school may have a special need that requires an additional teaching slot. Actually, it's the equivalent of a teacher slot, so that we'd like to allow the flexibility to the superintendent to where if that special need is a paraeducator, we could also do that as well. So with regards to that, it would allow 5 appeals from our schools so that we can take a look at them and award them when justifiable. Row 47, we move on to staffing in the special education area. We're adjusting to the board-approved ratios here. 5 teachers, 2 paraeducators to get it to the staffing ratios, $594,000. Row 48 is an appeal at the assistant position, 1 slot. The footnote associated with this, footnote 9, indicates that in the past we have had, we adjust to the current staffing ratio for assistant principals, and then we would add them back. We would back them out when we'd adjust to the ratio and add them back as appeals. So, and we've been doing this for a number of years. So what we're proposing here is that the staffing allocation be changed so that basically each school gets a full assistant principal instead of a half assistant principal. And in doing so, rather than showing a reduction of 14 slots here and 13 slots to adjust it to the ratios and adding 14 as appeals. We took 13 of those to come up with the actual 1 additional slot that we're asking for. And the budget provided for that 1 slot is $91,000. The next several line items are basically adjusting counselors to the board-approved ratios and then asking for an appeal. So for counselors, the adjustment is -1 and the appeal is 1. So there's a wash there. The same for librarians, 1.5 positions as an adjustment to the board-approved ratios and 1.5 as an appeal. Clerical assistants to adjust to board-approved ratios. 3.5 custodians. We're adding 5.5 based on board-approved ratios. We've had additional square footage that's going to be added for wings that will be completed or will be completed for the beginning of the school year or during the school year. So we're providing for that. Row 56, staffing social workers +2. This would be 2 new positions to assist with the current workload. Item 7, reconciliation of position control, -4.5 teaching slots. So basically, when we go through this process, we maintain budget. We actually create the staffing budget through position control. We include how many teachers are at or budgeted at each school site. And we compare that to the actual count that's included in HR's calculations. The two should agree. And when you consider we're in the 24 to 2,500 teacher range, and there was only a difference of 4.5, but I think it shows that very, very close. Nonetheless, we're making that adjustment here so that we can reconcile it. Same thing for row 58. There's an adjustment there for immersion to board approved ratios, half a teaching slot there. Any questions up until this point? Because the next item I want to go a little deeper into discussion. It'll take a few more minutes than what I've been spending on each item prior to this.
Any board comments, questions? Seems to be none. Mr. Gidger, proceed, sir.
Okay. Okay, so for item 10, it shows a cost of zero relating to the group, or rather, for group insurance health. And footnote 10 basically explains that what we're moving towards, or what we'd like to do, and there's going to be a separate agenda item where we're going to actually ask the board to vote on this, and, so that we can be given some direction on that. The group health schedule has been reworked that and included at Schedule A. So if we can, Ms. Reshort, if you can bring us to that particular. And so this is our group health premium rate structure with one modification. And this modification is about in the middle of the form. If you'll notice that there's a column entitled Retiree Trust. The amount shown there are either $10 or $20, depending on the number of participants being covered in those categories. Everyone able to locate that particular column? So what we're doing here is, in the past, when the general fund made contributions to the retiree trust, retiree insurance trust, it did so in a single transfer from the general fund to the trust at the end of the year. And what we're looking at doing is just incorporating it into the group health premium rate structure for a couple of reasons. One, to be done monthly, as opposed to having to remember to do that at the end of the year when we're closing out the books for the year. It would be done monthly. And secondly, this rate schedule would be followed by all funding sources. So grants, who in the past did not pay this $10 or $20 premium, did not pay or fund any of that $500,000 transfer to the retiree trust, will now be doing so, because some of those retirees were grant funded during their career. So that is definitely a benefit to breaking it up separately, as opposed to just making the transfer once a year. Also included in that same column, in those $10 and $20 amounts, is the $400,000 that previously, in previous years, had been transferred to the self-insurance fund, and then the self-insurance fund in turn would transfer $400,000 to the same trust. What this rate schedule does is it puts it into one column. As I mentioned, all funding sources fund their share of that amount, and transfers the sum total of the 500,000 and 400,000, 1/12 each month. So by the time we get to the end of the year, the 500,000 has been funded, the 400,000 has been funded, and those amounts are transferred on a monthly basis. So that's basically the only change. There's no change with regard to what the employees paying, and the change is we're actually incorporating that $500,000 into the board's contribution through the schedule, as opposed to showing it as a transfer at the end of the year. That's basically the biggest difference. But it allows for grant funds to pay for or fund for their retirees, whereas the general fund is doing that on their behalf right now.
Thank you, Mr. Guidry.
Any questions with regards to the proposed premium rate schedule? We will come back to it as a separate agenda item and ask the board to vote, so we'll know how to move forward with it. But we wanted to review it since it is part of the general fund budget process. So this is basically the review. We'll come back and visit it at a later agenda item during this meeting.
Thank you, sir.
I have one question. This is Kate. I'm sorry, Britt.
Go ahead, Ms. LeBeau.
Will we see any benefit interest-wise from doing it monthly, or from, through putting it into the trust? Have y'all run out any estimate to determine whether or not that could be an advantage as well?
Will we see any benefit? I'm sorry. What can you repeat the question? The benefit from that regard will be in the retiree trust, because those funds will be there, will be accumulated during the year. So the benefit would be there.
Right, that was my question, I guess, is have y'all run out those numbers to determine what you anticipate that will generate?
Right now, with the interest rates fluctuating the way they are, it's sort of difficult to do, but ultimately, if we're to use 1.5%, I would hope that by the end of the year, we would have averaged 1.5% of interest on each month's transfer. So that would give us an estimate of what that would equate to. So you're probably talking about $10,000 thereabouts.
Okay, thank you.
Pretty soon we're going to have to pay banks to deposit money.
I believe you're right, Mrs. Santani. If there are no more comments, we'll ask Mr. Guidry to keep going. When he finishes with 2.2, we're going to take a 5-minute break. They want technology issues here they're going to deal with. So as soon as we're finished with 2.2 and Mr. Guidry's done with this one, we will take a 5-minute break.
We'll move forward with 2.2.
We'll move forward with, sir.
Okay.
When we finish with 2.2, we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break so technology can fix some of the glitch.
Just flip back to where I was real quickly. Okay, moving on to the next line item, the Jumpstart Summer Program, $250,000. What this represents is funding for stipends for our students who attend summer school. So basically, while attending summer school, they receive a small stipend while working towards obtaining Carnegie and credentialing units during the summer. So that $250,000 would assist in funding the students that have exhibited an interest in, or expressed an interest in attending the summer programs. The number that we've been seeing that was on last year, that we're seeing this year, is a number that we're using for next year. This year, we were able to fund it with a non-recurring source. So next year, we actually want to put it in as a recurring source so we can do it from summer to summer. Next line item is a transfer to self-funded construction committed to school site renovations for Prairie, Carencro Heights, and Lafayette High School, $1.1 million. That amount equates to or approximates the amount that were approved in August of 19, when we were just beginning this school year. Our MFP revenues, once the legislature approved it, did in fact include an increase. And just as we did not budget the increase for the fiscal year 21 budget, we had not budgeted any increase for the fiscal year 20. So when that did in fact occur, about 1.1 million, the budget was revised and 1.1 million was transferred to self-funded for this purpose. So we're putting that, or restoring that 1.1 million, in essence, making it a recurring transfer. So that's what this line item represents. Currently, we have a little over 1.7 that's already being transferred on a recurring basis. So this 1.1 million would bring it up to 2.8 million a year that would be transferring to self-funded construction, basically to provide debt service for future bond sales for construction of these new schools. The next line item is the transfer in from school.
Hang on, Mr. Guidry. Dr. Aguilar has a comment.
We can't hear Dr. Aguilar.
Yes, sir.
They can't hear you, Dr. Aguilar. Can you hear him now, Mrs. Santani? No, he's no.
No, we can't hear him.
Okay, he's not speaking right now. Hang on, board members.
I have a motion to make while he works through his technical difficulties. If you want to.
All right, Miss. Yes, sir, Mrs. Santani, go ahead and make your motion, and I'll try to keep track of it. Get it to Ms. Blanco. Go ahead.
All right, Mr. President, I move that the board increase the transfer to self-funded construction committed for school site renovations, repairs, Prairie, Carencro Heights, and Lafayette High School line item from $1.1 million to $2.8 million.
Did you get that, Ms. Blanco? Okay. We have a motion by Mrs. Santani. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Little. We have a motion on the floor that we increase the transfer to the self-funded construction fund committed for Prairie, Carencro Heights, and Lafayette High from 1.1 million to 2.8 million. As soon as the actual motion comes up, I'll read it again. We have a motion by Mrs. Santani, a second by Ms. LeBeau. Do we have any public comment? Okay, the official motion is that the board increase the transfer to self-funded construction committed for school site renovation / repairs at Prairie, Carencro Heights, and Lafayette High School line item from 1.1 million to 2.8 million. Motion by Mr. Santani, seconded by Ms. LeBeau. We have now opened the floor up for public comment. The number is 337-521-7018. By request, we have asked that we extend the time between calls from 45 seconds to a minute. We'll go ahead and do that. We do have a call come in.
difficult time in the legislative school system, but I do want to just speak a little bit about how significant long-term decisions are. And here we have 3 schools, in particular Lafayette High, the oldest in of our campuses across the district. You know, putting these recurring funds, adding these recurring funds, speaks to an important priority in the district of making sure that these schools are adequate, or more than adequate, are available to teach students, available to educate students, and they should be certainly made a priority in the school district, not just in long-term words, but also so I hope that you will vote in favor of adding to that recurring fund so that we and begin to meet these very significant facilities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Espinoza.
Can someone please summarize what the caller said in short few words? Mr. President, can someone who was on the phone or heard more clearly what the caller said just give a quick summary?
Ms. Centania, was Ms. Espinoza, and she was, of course, in favor of going from 1.1 to 2.8 at these 3 schools.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Here we go.
This is the public comment line. You state your name, and we have 3 minutes for public comments only.
And my name is, and also happy to say that I hope that this passes the middle school that they would.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. If you didn't hear that one, it was another call in support of the motion. We don't seem to have any more public comment. I will go ahead and open the floor for any board member comments. Dr. Aguilar?
Transfer from $1.1 million. We would need Mr. Guidry to comment on where will that increased money be pulled from in order to make that transfer.
Yes, in essence, we'd have to go back. Currently, as presented, the proposed budget reflects about $13,000 excess or surplus. So to add the 1 million, in essence, would be approximately $1.8 million shortfall that we'd have to go back and look for offsets for that 1.8 million. I can say that in balancing the budget as presented, it was quite a challenge. We have a charter school that's expanded 400 impact of right at $4 million to our school district, and to overcome that and address the minimal requested increase would be a pretty significant challenge. But nonetheless, if the board decides to do so, we'll move forward accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Guidry. Do we have any other board member comments? Mr. Marston?
I guess my question is, will we divide this money up equally between the three schools, or how do we determine the need? Because we all know that Lafayette High, you could use 2.8 million alone. So I was just wondering, if this were to pass, how would you determine how much money you would spend on each school?
Mrs. Nanny?
Yes, I believe that once the dollar amount, whatever the dollar amount is, the 1.1 or the 2.8, we can, when we come back with the capital budgets at 2 meetings from now, we can incorporate these dollar amounts here and provide the board with an update as to how much funds are available, how much debt service or bonds could be sold at that point in time, how much we have in pay-as-you-go, and you add that up together, and that's a dollar amount that the board would have to work with at that point in time, come school year, and then the board would provide us with directions on how they would like to proceed at that time.
Thank you.
Ms. Morrison, what is it's allocating 2.8 million recurring funds every year. We put aside to build a brand new brand new Parish.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
So that's what it's. This is recurring funds that will be used.
Just to say, okay.
Correct. Just 2 point. Go to any school, it would be recurring funds. 2.8 million would be budgeted moving forward to where you can actually build these three schools.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying
It would
that.
be adequate to do so, but it would get you one step closer to being able to do so.
Just logically.
Thank you.
So by my calculations, $2.8 million, if we make that transfer, and it's recurring revenue that's in that fund, using today's bonding capacity, which could change monthly, but for every $1 million we have available, we can borrow approximately $16.7 million. So $2.8 million in that fund would get us about $46.7 million if we sold bonds today. So it gives you an idea about where we are and what we might be able to do in the near future if the board can agree on projects that are worthy for consideration.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Santani, do you have any comments on your motion?
Certainly. I would just make the point, and the reason I made this motion, I think the veteran board members, we started doing this about 3 years ago, putting recurring money into this line item to try to build up bonding capacity and address the facilities go. And we've done an admirable job thus far. But I couldn't help but notice in the revenue section that we are projecting an increase in revenues of $9.691 million. And we were only putting $1.1 million towards this line item. I think the way I look at it is we are either as a school system, as a board, as a community, dedicated and serious about the facility issues we have and correcting those facilities issues, or we're not. And either way is fine. You know, it's a community and collective decision. But I believe that we're all as a group serious about these issues. And so as a result, I am asking for less than a third of the projected revenue increase be dedicated to replacing these schools that are in, I think all would agree, deplorable condition. That's my comment. Thank you.
Do we have any board member comment on this agenda item before we go to the vote?
Mr. Lunchley.
Mr. Guidry,
Yes,
go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, and this isn't for or against what Mr. Centani is saying, but increase in revenues, you almost have to take a look at what's happening to expenditure. More specifically, we have in the state level 1.2 charter schools, so that reduces it down. 1.1 right now, if nothing changes, is going to self-funded construction. 200 to contingency and 3.19 investments. So that's about half. The other half, if you look at on the expenditures that net out to about 3.2 million, 2.5 of that on charter schools. So you can see very quickly, it doesn't take any line up to fully utilize. It appears to be a significant number. 9 million. By the time you back the impact of charter schools, that's almost half. And the rest of it, for the most part, is going to staffing and a few increases that you will see when we go over expenditures. So I'm not saying that it's not a for or against, but I think that's important to keep in mind when considering boarding made a decision.
Thank you, Mr. Guidry. Do we have any other board member comment before we go to the vote? Mr. Centani?
Mr. Guidry is right. Let me correct my statement in saying that the full $9 million is not available to spend in this fashion. It's correct, and I misspoke. But, Mr. Guidry, would you say that this number that I'm requesting is 50% of the discretionary spending increases? I can certainly count well over $2 million in staffing increases, which does not include the step increase for our employees. So my point being, we are increasing spending in whatever fashion we deem is the best overall for the students of this parish. But we have it within our authority to do without something that we are not doing, that we are doing without today, and build schools. Or if we choose to say that these staffing increases or any of these other increases are more a priority than building these schools, again, it's a collective decision and it's fine one way or the other. But I think we ought to all just go ahead and just take a second to think about what it is that we truly prioritize. Because, one of the most impactful things I ever heard a politician say was, politicians like to talk about priorities. Show me your budget, and I'll show you your priorities.
Thanks. Any other board member comment? Ms. LeBeau?
I would say, or my question is, this motion is in anticipation that we're able to find an additional 1.7 million that's not currently budgeted within this budget, correct? So to me, this is aspirational, but if it comes back and we're not able to find the full 1.7 million on top of that, we can then at that in a later budget meeting, work with the number that we are able to allocate, correct?
That is
So,
correct.
okay, so this, at this point, this motion, although it seems ambitious, is a goal for us to work towards, so that we, like Mr. Centetti said, put our priorities where our, you know, where our speech has been for the last, you know, campaign cycle, which I think all of us said this is a priority. So I just want to reassure everybody that, you know, while this number seems ambitious, it's aspirational and doesn't have to be definitive, but puts us in the, with the in mind that we are going to put as much money towards this goal as we can. That's all I just want to say. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you. Any other board member comments before we get to the vote? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, I'll call the vote.
Let's take a 5 minutes. Let's take 2 hours. Let's break before we start the expenditure.
Board members, after this vote, we're going to take a short break. The technology can do multiple things, about a 5-minute break. We will still be on 2.2 when we come back.
Not to vote out there.
We're waiting on Dr. Shasso.
Mr. Angel, you should just unmute your microphone and say, I have a question.
I was military, Mr. Centennial. I was told to raise my hand, and so I raised my hand.
Mr. Angel, I cannot see any of the board members on my screen like maybe y'all can. You're gonna have to jump. You're just gonna have to jump in when and if you have a question.
Okay. I just have a question. I didn't see the last vote, and it really doesn't matter to me. But can the public see how we voted? Is it a screen I can't see?
We were able to. Okay, it was 4-5-4. Motion failed.
Mr. Angel, if you go to the agenda item in board docs, you should be able to see the motion and how people voted.
All right, all the votes in. Nine for, none against. Motion carries. We'll go ahead and take about a 5-minute break, board members. Public.
All Zoom members, please do not log out. Just put yourself on mute.
Got everything set up over there. We'll leave the meeting here. 2. Test 1, 2.
Test.
We are going to go. We are going to do a Zoom check. All board members.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to resume this board meeting. We are still on item 2.2, finance. Mr. Guidry?
Yes. So at this point, we're at the expenditure section of the proposed budget, more specifically the cost centers. Actually, we can move forward to board agenda 2.3. What happens is, so you have an 1100 series, you have a 1200 series, 13, 14, and we can discuss the sections of the general fund budget summary by agenda item. So if there aren't any other comments with regards to the general fund budget summary, we can move forward to agenda item 2.3 and discuss the 1100 series, which is included in the general fund budget.
That's fine, Mr. Guidry. All board members understand we're going to start with 2.3 and go down. Mr. Guidry will state what the fund is and ask if you have any questions. If you have no questions, we'll move on to the next item. We'll start with 2.3, general fund cost center proposed budget for the 1100 series. Mr. Guidry?
Yes, so I would ask if there are any questions with regards to the cost centers in the 1100 series and the proposed increases, decreases in those cost centers. I do have a question. Ms. Richard, do you think we would be better served to keep the general fund budget summary up for reference, possibly? Is it possible to alternate between the two, or no? Can you have them both open? Okay, well let's stick with the cost centers, and we're looking at the 1100 series cost centers. Ask if there are any questions with regards to that series.
Any board member questions? We'll go ahead and move on to 2.4, Finance General Fund Cost Center proposed budgets for the 1200 series. Mr. Guidry?
Yes, I would ask if there are any questions with regards to the 1200 series cost centers.
$2.5 Finance General Fund Cost Center proposed budgets for the 1300 series.
Any questions regarding the 1300 series cost centers?
Mr. Guidry, where are the SRO, SSO line items? Which
1400?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No questions. 2.6 Finance General Fund Cost Centers proposed budget for the 1400 series. Any questions on this cost center?
1482, Dr. Aguilar, if you.
Okay. Okay, so members of the board, we have an increase of 2 SRO positions in this cost center.
Yes.
And likewise, we have also increased the number of assistant principals through staffing. And we currently have 9 positions that are tagged as school safety officers, of which 1 is vacant. So we have 9 SSO officers with 1 vacancy. Total salary and benefits for those 9 SSO officers is $674,000 in the budget. In thinking about the expansion in the SRO program in Lafayette Parish, and the fact that SSOs are really what I would call legacy positions. They have been around as long as I can remember, and they were largely created because the district did not have a mechanism to easily add additional resource officers. So when schools needed help, oftentimes one of the things they were provided was a school safety officer. 2 years ago, we entered into an agreement with the Sheriff's Department and local law enforcement, and now we have a very robust SRO program in the district. I would like the board to consider cutting the number of SSO positions from the current 9 down to only 3 positions in the budget. So in effect, cutting 6 of those SSO officers. In talking with Superintendent Trosclair, and it's been recommended that we consider holding on to at least 3 of those SSO officers. They would be retained at E.J. Sam, Northside, and La Rosen centers. Cutting those 6 SSO officers would free up about $449,000 in the general fund. So I'd be willing to make that in the form of a motion for the board consideration.
Mr. Guidry?
Yes. For making the motion, there are actually 10 with 1 vacancy. So if you want to
change that
motion, I just wanted to make it
so we change that to cut 7 and retain 3.
If you'd like to make a formal motion, Dr. Aguilar, I'll allow it.
Yes, I would. This is for Zoom. Thank you. My motion would be to cut 7 SSO positions currently proposed in the general fund budget.
Did it include that we would leave 3 or just a cutting of 7?
With the 3 remaining positions to be assigned to the EJ staff, Northside, and LaRosen.
We have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mr. President.
Looks like we have a second from Mr. Centennial. Wait for the motion to be typed up.
I do have a couple of clarification questions on the motion that can be answered by our attorney if she's available. And
Mrs. Centennial.
I have a question for the attorney, one for Mr. Guidry on a clarification. I wanted to know if Mr. Guidry, the $449,000 number remains the same at 7.
Did you hear that, Mr. Guidry?
That number would change. So if we I can take an average, and that would.
You can get it to the nearest 20,000 if you like.
You can. Correct. That number will change, Mrs. Centani.
Mrs. Centani, my calculations show about 472.
What we're asking is do we need to change the motion and not specify which schools? Because from what I understand, it'll be up to the superintendent of where the SSOs would stay. Okay, you can remove the 3 schools. The motion would just be to reduce SSOs by 7, retaining 3. Correct.
Correct. Do that.
Yes. We're waiting for any public comment. 337-521-7018. Wait about a minute. If we have no comment, we'll go to board member. There seems to be no public comment. Do we have any board member comment on this item?
I believe Mr. Lachele can't see anything, so I'll say Mr. Angel may have a comment, I believe.
Okay, Mr. Angel, if you have a comment, please chime in. I'm not seeing any of you, so if you have, please just chime in.
Okay, I'm here. I would just like to speak against the motion. Quite the contrary. The folks over at Canberra High School are telling me they need not an additional, because they don't have one, but they'd like to have a safety office beside the SROs that are on campus now. Children need to be free from fear. That's part of helping our children learn. They must be, of course, not hungry, etc., but they also must feel comfortable. And I think additional office, safety officer at Canberra High School would be beneficial.
Thank you, Mr. Angel. Any other board member comment?
This is Kate Booth. Can you explain to me the differences between what a school resource officer may do and a school safety officer might do? Just so everybody is clear on if there is a difference between the program that has been implemented and the prior duties the safety officers are doing.
It's Ms. Gardner. One of the two different aspects is that the school safety officer is an employee of the Lafayette Parish school system and reports to an SRO is a police officer and has criminal though as a whole, where can assist going into the classroom. Ultimately, they assign to campus. That's what the school resource officer and the contract does on that side. Basically, school rules within our the resource officer stays on the criminal and law side.
And one more question: how many vice principal positions did we just add through or did we propose in the budget?
So through the staffing in years past, it was asked to add them as appeals, but instead of going to application formula, through that we would only be adding one add to the budget, to where every school would have LEODs and DUSON, shared assistant principal, where they would be allocated a full-time assistant principal.
Okay. And have we talked to, am I muted? No.
You're good.
Has anybody spoken to, obviously Tommy had a good example with Karen Crow, but has anybody spoken to any other schools to see if taking the removal of these SSOs is going to have a large impact on their campus?
I didn't talk specifically to the principals.
I can't hear you. Can you hear him?
I think we muted. He was
Okay,
muted.
Kate, can you hear me?
So there are 30 plus schools in the district that do not have school safety officers. Mr. Angel is correct in saying they would probably want to have one at Karen Crowe High School. In all likelihood, every one of our schools would likely want to have an SSO officer. However, this board never advanced increasing the number of SSOs. It is a legacy position. It's a position that we retain without any real data to prove the value of the position. We do not collect any reports from the SSO officers. We do not tally their effectiveness. It's something that the principals years ago have petitioned for. They received an SSO officer, and today we're left with 10 when we have a fully viable SRO program now in the district. In this budget that we're being asked to consider, there are 2 additional SRO officers being proposed. So if we're looking at finding ways to build more schools, to use revenue more effectively, it's time to consider whether or not there is sufficient value to retain these positions. And if there is, maybe we ought to be talking about adding 35 more to the budget.
And I think maybe what you might have been asking, Ms. LeBou, was maybe the assistant principals we added at the high schools, according to the discipline referrals early in the year. I think that was 3 assistant principals we had added, one at Acadiana, one at Lafayette High, maybe one at Karen Crowe. It might have been 4, one at Northside. Mrs. Santani could elaborate on that if that's what you were asking about the assistant principals.
I think we converted 2 halves into a full and then added a whole at Northside, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. I think you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any more board member comments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
I just wanted to mention that the SSOs are not in the cost center 1482. They are in the school locations. So when those adjustments are made.
Thank you.
Mr. Lachele, please check with Ms. Boudreau that we are able to keep this motion on this item, as I believe the school locations is the 1500 series in the next item, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that where it is? 1500?
Mr. Billy Mr. Guidry needs to confirm that, but I think it is.
We have 4 yes, 5 no's.
Academic.
The motion has failed.
I'm going to say you're fine.
Mr. Guidry said we move to 2.7. General Fund Cost Center proposed budget for the 1500 series. Any board member questions? We'll move on to 2.8, Finance, Early Obligation and Release of Funds for Textbooks and Consumables. I think we're going to need a motion on this item.
Mr. President, I move that the board approve the early obligation release of funds to purchase ELA, math, science, social studies, foreign language, art, and CTE textbooks and consumables for the 2020-2021 school session in the amount of $3,637,178 as attached in the public content section of this agenda item.
Angel, second.
We have a motion by Mr. Centani, seconded by Mr. Angel. We're going to open the floor up for any public comment. 337-521-7018. And the motion is that the board approve the early obligation and release of funds to purchase ELA math, science, social studies, foreign language, arts, and CTE textbooks and consumables for the 2020-2021 school session in an amount of $3,637,178 as attached in the public content section of this agenda item. We have no calls coming in for public comment. I'll go ahead and open up the floor for any board member comments. There are no board member comments. Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote, please. Eight for, none against, 1 absent. We'll go ahead and move on to 2.9. The motion does carry. We'll move on to 2.9, Finance, Group Health Insurance Premium Rate Schedule. Mr. Guidry?
Yes, this is Schedule A that we had reviewed earlier during the meeting when we were discussing general fund budget summary. These amounts have been incorporated into the budget as proposed. So by approving this item, in essence, the board would be approving what is already in the proposed budget. And as I mentioned earlier, it provides for a separate column for contributions to the retiree trust which facilitates monthly allocations to the trust, as well as ensuring that the grants fund their employees rather than the general fund.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion. We have a motion. Seconded by Dr. Aguilar.
Can you reread it? It was, we couldn't hear. Thank you.
The motion on the floor is that the board approve Schedule A, which incorporates $900,000 into the premium schedule that will be remitted directly to the retiree benefits funding trust attached in the public comment section of this item. The motion was made by Mr. Morrison and seconded by Dr. Aguilar. Do we have any public comment on this motion? We seem to have no public comment on the motion. Do we have any board member comments on the motion?
Mr. President, I'd like to give a little background on where this originated.
Certainly, go ahead.
So last month, Employee Retiree Insurance Advisory Committee, there was a motion made to reduce the group insurance fund's contribution to the other post-employment benefits trust by $400,000. I'd like to make a point that during that discussion, Mr. Dugas brought up that the general fund typically pays somewhere in the neighborhood, or let's say the board, not just the general fund, the board typically pays on the order of 77% of all premiums. That, and Mr. Guidry, if I use a number and it's incorrect, please stop me and correct me. The board pays 77% of all premiums, and so I think main motivation of the insurance committee was to recommend that to the board that we no longer use employee or retiree insurance premiums to contribute to the post-employment benefits trust. I pointed out to them that it would not be a $400,000 savings on their premium, and if they reduced the amount of revenue or the amount of the expenditure, the board would very rightly receive 77% of the benefits, while the employees, I think, fairly would receive 23% of the benefits. I have a slight issue with the way this is constructed. There's a lot to like about this, in that it solves the problem we've had for a number of years where employees paid with grants do not contribute their share to the post-employment benefits trust. That's an issue. Using employee and retiree insurance premiums to contribute to the trust, I have a basic issue with the fairness of that. This particular schedule, the numbers in it add up to basically reducing the contribution of the other post-employment. It basically says that the board will take 100% of the benefit of reducing the contribution to the post-employment benefits trust, not 77% like we contribute to the premium. So I would be happy to support this with numbers that reflected the 77% rather than the 23%. I think it's fair that our employees and retirees receive the 23% of their insurance premium as a benefit and reduce their costs, their claims by 100, or not their claims, their premiums by $100,000. So that's my thing. This comes from the Employee Insurance Committee, but it's not quite, I think, exactly to the level of their intent. But there is a lot to like about this.
Thank you, sir. Any other board member comment? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, I'll call for the vote. What's that?
That's what he said.
The motion carries 7 yes, 1 no, 1 absent. Next item on the agenda, 2.10, Finance 2020-2021 Proposed Group Insurance Fund Budget. Idri?
With regards to the proposed group health self-insured fund, basically no difference in premium other than the reduction of 400,000 just mentioned, since that 400,000 being directly remitted by the general fund, there's no longer a need to transfer to self-insurance. So the premium revenues reflect that reduction. Other than that, the biggest, the main change is that Hub International, Ms. Lynn Fontaine, our consultant with Hub International, presented to the board as an information item during its most recent meeting. The first one was to implement Regenix, which is an alternative to orthopedic surgery, estimated savings of $1.3 million. The second recommended design change was for self-funded retiree population, saving an estimated $300,000 to $400,000. The third recommended change is to increase the brand name, estimated savings of $200. And the fourth is to increase the enhanced and basic plan participation prescription out-of-pocket maximum from $1,000 to $1,250, an estimated savings of $130,000. It was these recommended changes that Mr. Fontaine felt would put us in a position of at least increase effective July 1. We'll continue to monitor and ensure and see if these savings are actually coming to pass. But nonetheless, these savings are incorporated into the proposed group health self-insured budget. And I ask if there are any questions.
May I make a comment?
Any board member comments?
May I make a comment, Mr. President? Am I on mute?
There's no action needed on this item. Oh, go ahead, Justin. Mr. Sandy.
All right, I wasn't getting any reaction from you. I was wondering if anybody could hear me. I would just like I know there's no action needed on this item, I would just like to point out that this is another recommendation from the Employee Insurance Committee that these changes to the plan be adopted. This was presented at the same meeting last month.
Thank you, sir. Any other board member comment? I can't see any of you, so if you have anything you'd like to say, please go ahead and chime in. Hearing none, we'll move on to the last item on the agenda, 11, Finance. Proposed increase fiscal year 2021 coaching stipend for coaches of extracurricular activities. Dr. Aguilar?
Okay. Board members, earlier tonight there was an attachment early on in the meeting that provided a pay raise for athletic coaches. The pay raises ranged from a low of $1,500 to a high of $5,900, depending on whether the coach was a head or an assistant and how many sports he or she coached. I would like the board to consider also providing an increase in the stipend for all band directors, vocal directors, choral directors, assistant cheerleaders, speech debates, dance squad, and our robotics coaches. The proposal calls for an average stipend increase of $1,224. With benefits, the per person cost would be about $1,550, and the grand total for this expenditure is about $182,000. And so I would like to offer that in the form of a motion. The recommended action reads as follows: that the board approves, including in the proposed 2021 general fund budget, an increase in the coaching stipend schedule for coaches of extracurricular activity. Agenda item.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Angel, I'll second it, Doc.
We have a second from Mr. Angel. Do we have any public comment on this motion? 337-521-7018. We'll wait 1 minute. See if we get a call. We have a caller.
This is a public comment line. Please make sure and give your name, and please remember you have 3 minutes for comments only. Go ahead.
Julia Reed, President of Lafayette Parish Association of Educators. I would like to put our support in favor of this motion. We favor anything that shows value to the honor that is put into this, whether that's inside or outside of the classroom. And all of these people spend lots of time outside of the classroom, coaching and working with students. And we think it's important that that time is out monetarily as well as in other ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now take a 1 minute pause. Here we go. Second caller.
No, that was the timer.
Sorry.
Can you repeat what that caller said? I couldn't understand any of it. I'm sorry. This is Miss LeBou.
This is the public comment line. Please state your name, and remember you have 3 minutes for public comments only. Okay, you may begin.
Where all extracurriculars were considered and treated fairly. I'd like to see that continue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can you repeat what the caller said? I could not hear him at all.
Hannah, please repeat. I'm sorry, no one can hear you.
I could not hear either of the callers. Can you repeat or restate what they said?
Absolutely. So, Mr. Walker was in full support of this proposal, and he is at Lafayette High, and Miss Julia Reed, who is a teacher representative, also wanted to support anything that allowed teachers to provide continued support for students.
I'm sorry, you said Miss Reed said she does or she does not?
Both callers were in support of the vote. We have another caller that I'll go ahead and answer. Hi, this is the public comment line. Please remember to state your name, and you have 3 minutes for public only.
Yes, my name is John Snyder. I'm calling to support this as well. I'm over at Como High School. I know about 10 years ago, the last time that a raise was done, that it was done with all extracurriculars included on that. So I would hope that we would want to keep all of that together again at the same time instead of creating a divisive measure between those two. So thank you.
Thank you. That was Scott Geiger from Como High School and was in support of the vote due to asking to include all extracurricular. Ms. Mason, were you able to hear that? Thank you. About 40 seconds left for the next to close it out. This is a public comment line. Please remember to state your name, and you have 3 minutes for public comment only. Can you hear us? Hi, this is the public comment line. Please remember to state your name, and you have 3 minutes for public comment only. I can see that your connection went through, but I cannot hear you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Might have bad service. Hi, my name is Lauren Leon-Tucker, and my comment is that, and I may be misunderstanding, but it appeared that the increase in money available for coaches was not going to be delegated to cheer or dance team coaches. And I just wanted to comment that as a coach of a dance team in school and my district, we do operate year-round, oftentimes our teams overlapping, and I appreciate all that all of the coaches do, regardless of sport, whether it be soccer or dance or debate coaches and things like that. We do put a lot of heart and time into helping our team and keeping it sterilized. And if there is an increase in the amount of pay available for coaches, and it does include all of us, I have to feel like that is unfair to us, and I just want to put my weight on that.
Actually, Ms. Leon-Tucker, Dr. Aguilar's motion to the floor did include cheer at the middle.
I didn't get that last part. Dr. Aguilar's motion did include, I'm sorry?
It did include cheer and at the middle and high school level.
How about dance team?
Yes, dance and pep. It also included that.
Can you say that again?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Aguilar made a motion with Mr. Angel making a second. It's okay. Let's try this. Can you hear me better now? It does include cheer and dance.
Hello.
It's cheer and dance.
Maybe she, ma'am, does include cheer, dance, and pep, robotics, speech, vocal, and band at elementary, high school, and middle school levels.
Thank you, Mr. Lashley.
You're welcome. Hearing no other public comment, we'll go to board member comment. Do board members have any comment on this motion?
I do.
Go ahead.
First of all, I have a question of what is the total price tag of this?
Mr. Guidry, the question for Mrs. Nanny is what is the total cost of this?
Justin, I don't have the number in front of me. I remember about $182,000.
That is correct.
182,000.
Let's see. $181,401.
So Justin,
I think
about
$182,000.
$182,000.
Good figure.
Thank you very much. How many employees does this impact?
111.
And I see, for instance, cheer, high school, and middle school, that the stipend is more than doubling. For vocal in high school, the stipend is going up about 60%. Band high school is certainly a very small increase, for relatively speaking. How were the increases calculated? Certainly there must have been some rationale because they're down to the penny. So, like proposed percentage, how did we come up with this?
Mr. Centani, this came out of the HR department. This table with the recommendations. So I don't know the calculation formula for each.
Is Ms. Thibodeau on? I'd like to hear her comment on this.
Mr. Centani, we did the calculation, so I'm going to ask him to respond. I'm going to walk down to his office.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Looking at each of the stipends, I tried to get it as close to some of the things with coaching and tried to go with how the coaches were done. So some of the coaches went or increased about some amount. So I tried to keep it around that and also hitting a certain dollar amount.
So this recommendation comes from the HR department?
This was something that we were asked to put together.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, Mr. Lashley.
Okay. Mr. V, I have a question. I know when the athletic coaches was done, specific percentages asked of the HR department, and if I'm not mistaken, and I mean, Coach Jefferson should be around. This was a 3 to 4 month process that was worked through, if I'm not mistaken. I don't speak out of turn. This seems to have been put together overnight using percentages that you have some pretty big jumps. Coach Jefferson, do you have any idea of what percentages were used? These percentages matched what were used athletically. Stating all of our extracurricular activity individuals don't deserve increases, but we look at the time that the coaches put in, you know, some are year round, some are not, so forth and so on. Could we get some clarification on this? Coach Jefferson, could you chime in? And then Mr. Veed, could you let me know exactly? I mean, did you just feed off of what the athletic department did for a 3-4 month process and then just include these? What kind of research was done on this other stipend that we're looking at now?
I looked at the coaching stipends and how much the average increase was for each person for the coaching stipend, and then I went for extracurricular and worked to try and get these to the same amounts, trying not to in middle and high, trying to not have them go higher than each. Went through for some of the others and tried to keep some things that are possibly on the same level, close to the same kind of stipend, or exactly how much each one was going to go up. And I had a target number that I was trying to hit, so I tried not to do too much with the percentages. I took a few days just sitting there and going through the numbers and moving everything around. And I'm pretty good at Excel, so everything is just, once I change a number, it all recalculates for me, so I don't have to sit there and go through like we did with the coaches. Once they got me the percentages of what they wanted to do, then the same thing with the coaches. It just takes a little while to go through, update all the numbers. I was trying not to do it as complicated as the coaches, to where we'd have maximums and things like that. I can certainly work that all in if we need to, or I can change it around if we need to. But I was trying to get an average number for each person, or an average increase in the stipend for each person, and trying not to put one group ahead of the other in elementary, middle, and high.
Okay. Yeah, because I know the athletic department worked on this since well before the holidays, looking at it, and that wasn't an overnight process. And the proposal put forward by athletic director for the athletic that was cut by a third to make the budget process just a little bit better, a little bit smoother. So that was actually, did you base it off of, let me see if I can explain this correctly. When the athletic department presented it for the budget, it was cut by a third. So that only 2/3 of what was asked for would be counted when you did this.
This was based off of the final version for the coaching. So the final number that you have on the board number for the coaches, it was based off of that.
Okay. Do we have any other board member comment?
Thank you.
Mr. Wu?
One, I'd just like to point out that I don't think this includes all extracurricular activities. So I don't think that, I just take umbrage with the fact that we're using the word all, because I think anybody could come and look at this list and say it's not, doesn't include all. Secondly, you know, I would really like to see a breakdown of hours. I know, and we're looking at the athletic, and not to say I agree or disagree with this proposal, But I think the athletic one was much more comprehensive, broken down. Obviously, it was had a lot more effort put into where you could actually see, you could correlate and determine how much they were being paid per day, per hour. So I would like a breakdown of that as well, because I can't, in my opinion, and I'm not saying anything bad, I'm a former high school cheerleader, but I think that we can't undervalue speech and debate when they're winning nationally for activities. I just would like to see a better breakdown of hours and requirements for how we're making these determinations, because this just looks like it's just incomplete in my mind. And I think that the fact that we don't have a robotics percentage yet, I think that's something that we need.
This was a hasty process at all. The intent of this motion was to try to give coaching stipend increases to many of the areas that have been severely neglected in Lafayette Parish. If you look at the work that's been done for the athletic coaches, you know, quite frankly, it's a tiered increase in supplement that's being recommended to the board. Coaches get an index based on their teacher's salary, based on the number of sports and whether they're head or assistant coaches. The average stated in their proposal was about $1,500. A coach who has an index of 6%, his average increase is $1,800. A coach with an index of 10% gets an increase of $2,086. A coach with an index of 12% gets a pay increase of $2,135. By the way, that 12% is about what a full-time coach is in Lafayette Parish, about 12%. However, the index for people who have 14% in their calculation gets $2,500, and anybody with more than 18% is going to be getting a pay raise of $3,590. The plan for the coaching supplement was such that we were going to be giving 111 people roughly $1,200 in net pay for the year. It's difficult for principals to hire sponsors, and it's also difficult for our principals to hire coaches. And I think we need to be fair with all of those individuals doing extracurricular duties, to give them a little bit something to make those salaries a little bit more competitive. And maybe we get other teachers who want to be sponsors of dance squads, the pep squads, and robotics teams, and speech teams. I think it's pretty straightforward. It is an across-the-board average increase of about $1,200.
Mr. President. Thank you, Lord. Any other board member comment before we go to the vote?
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
I would assume, Dr. Aguilar, that you, when you say we have a difficult time finding sponsors at the school level, we have, do we have openings? Like this I've been having a difficult time trying to make some sense of the proposal. So, like, do we have openings? Would be an excellent.
We, Mr. Santano, know that principals struggle with finding the necessary sponsors for some of these activities. And
Do we have openings?
I don't say there's any arm twisting, but there's an awful lot of work that goes into making sure every one of these teams has a sponsor.
But I don't. I'm sure that's the case. But like, do we have openings right now that we're trying to fill?
I don't know that we would have openings now with schools just about winding down this year, but during the summer and into the fall, principals definitely worry about trying to find somebody on their staff to sponsor these extracurricular activities.
Okay.
More board member comment.
Make a comment, please.
Ms. Mason?
Okay, so maybe this isn't a perfect proposal, but looking at the ones that we have listed out here: band, vocal, speech, cheer, dance, and robotics. You know, all the teachers that I've met that are these sponsors are very passionate, and, you know, they're severely underpaid in my opinion. I mean, they work year round. All of these are year round. And when is the last time, do we know when the last time was that they had a stipend increase here?
Most coaches are extracurricular activities, whether it's athletics or and so forth. So you're looking at probably 10 to 12 years is what I've been told.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Broussard.
Certain percentage that's due if we're going to make our final decision as to how not understanding how we got to this final dollar. It's puzzling in my mind. How do we give a 3% increase from 1.9 to 7% increase of 4%? As a question as to what rubric was used.
Mr. Reed, can you answer that, please?
That sum of money.
As far as the sum of money, I was just told how much to try and budget for. The percentages, like I said, I used it and tried to tie it back to how we did the cook bump anyone up very much. So I tried to stay within average that $100 to stay with, or some that as well, such as an assistant chair. I tried putting that up close to where the coaches were as well, and their stipends pretty close, except for whenever you get for band, just different things. Trying to compare it to the coaches that was done.
Mr. Broussard.
Is how we come to that? Is that the question? Not that we oppose the stipend, but a better more clear explanation as to how. What did we start with for the 3.17% to get to that final dollar? Is that the question that I am interested in finding?
Wait,
Answer that question.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Didn't Veed just explain that he got these numbers by comparing them to what the athletics, what the coaches for the other athletics are getting? I mean, in my opinion, I feel that we should value, our athletics as much as we value, the people who are doing band and vocal and speech and the things we have listed here. That's just my opinion. They should be similar, and so this was easier and faster to come up with because he was actually basing it off something that athletics carefully looked at.
Thank you. Any other board member comment?
This is.
Hearing none, Madam Secretary will call for the vote. Oh, Ms. LeBeau.
So sorry. 2 quick question. Caleb, who asked you to put this together?
It was a request from Dr. Aguilar through Mr. Gidry.
Okay, and who gave you the sum of money?
Dr. Aguilar gave me a total.
And who delineated these individual categories of extracurricular activities?
So those are already set out in the salary schedule that we currently have. The only thing that I did was, I believe one or two of them were grouped together. Maybe it was just one. The elementary band and middle school band was grouped to one, and I just separated them out so that it looked like vocal. But all of these categories, except for robotics and robotics assistant, all of these categories were already spelled out in our salary schedule.
Okay, so we're creating new categories, we're separating categories, and we are we're not considering, we've considered new categories, but we haven't considered additional categories other than robotics, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I can add other categories if you'd like. These are, I took what we already had, and then it was asked that we add in robotics and robotics assistant.
Okay. And that was asked by who?
I believe it was Dr. Aguilar. I really don't remember.
Okay.
I think it came from Mr. Gidry. It may have been Dr. Aguilar, I'm not sure.
Okay. I have Mr. President, I have a procedural question. Can we make a counter motion to defer deciding on this until we get more information?
You can make a secondary motion to defer. You have to make a motion, somebody has to second, and then we vote on that one. If that one passes, it's deferred. If it fails, come back to this motion and pass it, fail it.
A substitute motion, Ms. LeBoux.
Yes. I'd like to make a substitute motion to, no, I don't want to make a substitute motion. Never mind. Thank you.
Mr. President, any further board member comment?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Shasso?
Sir, thank you, Mr. Lechley. Can y'all hear me clearly? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Let's see. Was there consideration in this coaching stipend as far as the number of hours worked? Because I see some, I can understand.
There you go.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I can understand the breakdown when it comes to the band high school, the increases towards it, but was there consideration given to the number of hours? I'm assuming this is because folks have to stay after school here and there, as far as the difference between assistant chair in high school, middle, speech robotics assistants, as far as, you know, how many competitions have they been going to, and the number of extra hours they've been working outside of their regular scope.
I don't have anything for hours. We actually don't require that these people track their hours for the extracurricular. activities. Whenever I go through, like I said, I did a comparison based off of coaching. From what I know of the extracurricular activities and what's done with them, that's as far as I went. But we actually, to my knowledge, I don't have or know any way that they track hours for these extracurricular activities.
Ms. Morrison.
I have to agree. My kids are on cheerleading dance team, and I followed it very closely, and I know firsthand my son played football. I know firsthand how much work goes into these extracurricular activities for our sponsors. And I support wholeheartedly to give them more, because I know that we're doing it from the kindness of their heart, because that's their love. So I definitely support, increasing their salaries however we can. What we have for us, I think it could be cleaned up a little bit so we can see more clear of what we're looking at, but definitely they do deserve an increase. So that's my opinion on that. If we defer it, so our next budget meeting, we have it cleaned up a little bit more information and vote on it at that time. Mr. Henry, can we do that? Okay. So, I'm seeing some clearer numbers and more of a clear picture when we're looking at, but definitely got support giving our sponsors and coaches and folks that do extracurricular activity, because again, I know firsthand it's a lot of work, and I know they do it from the kindness of their heart. But yeah, I definitely support increasing their salaries.
Mr. President, I make a substitute motion that we defer this until April 15th.
Second. We have a motion by Mrs. Santana that we defer this till April 15th. We have a second by Ms. Morrison.
Sorry to restart the timer on the phone calls, Mr. President.
That's all right.
I thought we'd been going by 10 minutes ago. That is the last item, though.
Okay, you're good. And you're good on public comment.
Use yourself, Billy. I appreciate Mr. Guidry's candor that this is the last item. You're not alone, Mr. Guidry. You're not alone.
That was the time. No public comment.
That was the timer. You're good.
Comment.
Yes.
I have a question. In the athletics, did we have that broken down by hours? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
For the athletics, did they have it broken down by hours, how much time they spend with their sports? Because is that what we're requesting for these extracurriculars?
My knowledge, they were broken down. Coach Jeffers has the pay scale past and present. It wasn't broken down by hours.
I just wanted to make sure that, whatever we're requesting is what we've requested of the other athletics as well.
I think athletics was done just strictly by percentage.
Okay.
In how many sports. Some coaches all coaches coach more than one sport through the year. You know, a band director is all year because band is all year, so they don't jump from ton to the extracurricular activity. A lot of your coaches do as one season ends. A head coach in one position could be an assistant coach in another. And I think they were just done on percentages.
Just to kind of provide some clarification,
yes, sir, Mr. Jefferson.
For Ms. Mason's question, what we did was we took the surrounding parishes and what their coaching scale looked like and did a comparison. So we took Acadia, Vermilion, St. Landry, St. Martin, Berea, and compared it to what we were in Lafayette Parish. That's how we arrived at the percentage.
Okay, so I guess we'll do the same for these extracurriculars, Mr. Guidry.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Mason.
Dr. Aguilar.
Surrounding parishes, Ascension and St. Charles Parish pay a straight percentage of 14 to 15% of base salary. Vermilion Parish pays their directors 10% of their base and supplement an additional 1% for every event they participate in. Some of those directors in Vermilion Parish get as much as 18% of their salary. A head coach and a head band director get the same amount as do the assistants. St. Tammany people are paid 10-month employees and an additional $2,500. Our extracurricular activities in Lafayette Parish is woefully low compared to some of these parishes.
Mr. President, I wanted to defer this, and that was a question that was being asked. How did we come up with that? Was not clear to us that people in other parents will get a certain percentage of this. How we arrived to X amount of dollars to give us a clear picture. So when we voted to defer this, the question is not being asked. I
would point out, that the motion on the floor is to defer. If the motion to defer fails, we will have all night to take the merits of this item.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'm not sure if anybody's interested. I have the indices for coaches and extracurricular activities in front of me now. I can run down, if we could pull up the proposal for cheer, speech, and band, etc., as opposed to what's being proposed. The only significant jump, I think, is in cheerleading, and I can go down on the 15-year, just because it's between 0 and 30, and kind of give you what those percentages currently are, and we can compare them if needed.
Not to cut off, but on the sheet, if you look, I have the current rates on there from the year 1 to the year 30, so you can see what the current rates are for the extracurricular activities right now, and what the proposed is. So you'll be able to see that on that sheet.
Yes, sir. It's visible. They have to.
Yes, Mr. President.
Mr. Angel.
I'd like to call a question on the motion.
Okay, call a question. We'll go to vote.
Yes, see.
The motion is to defer. That the board defer this item until April 15th. Motion made by Mrs. Santani, seconded by Mr. Parsons.
Point of order, Mr. President. We need to vote on calling the question prior to voting on the motion.
Okay.
Which I'm sure Mr. Angel would be happy to withdraw his calling of the question if we move straight to a vote.
If he withdraws it, I have a comment. So that's up to you.
If it help.
Call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed.
No.
Ayes have it. We'll go to the vote that we the board defer this item until April 15th.
Actually,
yes, sir.
Point of information. Does it have to be unanimous? for us to go ahead and call the question?
Oh.
Vice President.
You look better than me.
Vice President, look it up. Dr. Shasta.
It doesn't have to be unanimous, Mr. President. Majority rule.
It doesn't require, if there's a second, then that's it.
Ms. Boudreaux.
You voted the motion.
Ms. Boudreaux, point of information, there was no second.
Yes, it was.
On the question, there was no second. I'm going to say, let's start this whole people.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Michelle, all the questions. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Santana. Do we need comment on this, or do we go straight to the vote? I call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay.
Dr. Shastall couldn't hear him, but he did say nay, or at least he mouthed it.
So it's 7-2.
Unmute yourself.
Mr. Courtney, you said you need my cell.
I said unmute yourself when you spoke.
Ms. Barton, I've been unmuting myself tonight.
If we're still in question of this, Ms. Morrison, I may do a quick Google search, and it appears that the 2/3 majority necessary to successfully call the question.
At 7-2, then you're good to go.
Now go to the substitute motion. The board defer this item until April 15th. Secretary.